Madam President, like I think virtually all of the members of this body, I believe we must prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Because of that, I support the international agreement that the Senate is debating this week because I am convinced that it is the best way to achieve that objective. We can stop Iran's nuclear weapons program in one of two ways, either diplomatically or militarily. Powerful international sanctions, which I have strongly supported, have brought Iran to the negotiating table. And on July 14th, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, and the European Union, the so-called P5+1 powers, concluded an agreement with Iran that, if it is implemented as it was agreed to, promises a peaceful diplomatic solution. Thanks to the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, Congress has had ample time to review the agreement. Now, I have spent hours and hours studying the agreement's text and scrutinizing our intelligence agencies' classified assessment of their ability to verify Iran's compliance. As a member of both the Senate's Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committees, I attended more than a dozen hearings and briefings with administration officials, outside experts, both for and against the agreement. And in the end, I have concluded that this agreement effectively blocks Iran's pathways to develop a nuclear weapon for well over a decade. Right now, what we heard from testimony from both those people who support and oppose the agreement is that Iran can acquire enough fissile nuclear material to make a bomb in less than 3 months. Now, the agreement extends this breakout time to at least 1 year by slashing Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium by 98% and banning enrichment above 3.67%, which is far below weapons grade, for 15 years. The agreement also reduces Iran's number of centrifuges by more than 2/3 for a decade, and it maintains inspectors' access to Iran's uranium mines and mills, so the whole life cycle of uranium, for a quarter of a century. These are just some of the many restrictions the agreement imposes on Iran. In addition, Iran is bound by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and other agreements to a permanent commitment not to pursue nuclear weapons, and as part of that agreement, to permit access by inspectors to any suspected sites. Of critical importance, the Iran agreement is not based on trust. None of us trust Iran, but it's based on an inspections regime that is more rigorous and more intrusive than any previous negotiated agreement. Nuclear experts are confident that we will be able to detect violations by Iran. And thanks to language in the agreement that allows the U.S. to respond unilaterally to a violation by reimposing U.S. and UN sanctions, Iran knows that it faces crippling consequences if it violates the agreement. Now, if Congress rejects the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran agreement, all of these advantages go away. The risk of an Iranian nuclear breakout and a regional nuclear arms race will increase dramatically. We will be left with no credible, non-military option for stopping Iran's nuclear program. Now, I certainly respect the views of my colleagues who oppose this agreement, and I have listened carefully to their arguments. Some of them assert that Iran will find a way to cheat, and therefore no diplomatic resolution is possible. However, most opponents are careful to avoid talk of military conflict and argue that we can reject this deal and we can rally the world to impose harsher sanctions and Iran will eventually capitulate. But sadly, that premise is at odds with the facts as they currently exist. Our negotiating partners in this deal Britain, France, Russia, China, and the European Union, have concluded that this is a fair agreement. In a briefing for senators last month, the ambassadors from these nations told us in no uncertain terms that there will be no going back to the bargaining table if Congress rejects this agreement. If the deal is rejected, the most likely outcome is that the international sanctions regime against Iran would unravel. The U.S. would be isolated, and we would lose credibility as a reliable negotiating partner. So, yes, we would have the ability to act unilaterally, but unilateral sanctions have their limits, as we've heard in this body. And our military commanders counsel us that even a robust military option would delay, but it would not prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, because they already have the nuclear know-how. This agreement is not about becoming friends with Iran or turning a blind eye to its efforts to destabilize the Middle East. In fact, we must redouble our efforts to help our allies counter Iran's malign influence in the region. In particular, our commitment to the defense of Israel should remain unshakable. And in addition, we must maintain vigorous sanctions against Iran for its support for terrorism and for its violations of human rights. Now, while there are risks to whatever course we take with respect to Iran, I believe that the choice is clear. Either we recognize that this agreement is the best available option, or we chase some fantasy agreement on our own as international sanctions collapse. Iran's nuclear program continues unchecked, and our options for stopping it are narrowed. I am convinced that the agreement negotiated by the U.S. and our allies is the least risky approach, and it's the approach that's most likely to succeed. And as I said last month in New Hampshire, I intend to vote to support this deal. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.